All right, guys. So welcome to the last, but not least, regular talk of this gathering. If you are excited for that, you can obviously show your excitement by asking questions on slido.com #bubble. And now to the talk.
Hello. Last talk of the gathering. Very exciting. Very exciting. So today we're going to talk about consistency. My name is Nacho, and I want you to make a list. Let's see if this works. Yes. So let's say I ask you, make a list of everything you do consistently. You might say, I wake up, and then I have breakfast, but you're probably not having breakfast in bed, so let's go a little deeper. You wake up, then you get up, then you go to the bathroom, then you have breakfast. This is better, but it really helps to remember that every behavior is associated with a context. There's a very good reason why you're not brushing your teeth in the kitchen. Your house was explicitly designed to encourage you to brush your teeth in the bathroom, so that's not random. So if you look at specific contexts, when my phone alarm goes off, that's when I wake up, and then I turn it off. When I unlock the phone, I realize that a bunch of people messaged me overnight, so I read my messages. Then, when I'm finished reading the messages, I'm in a reading mood, so I start checking email, I read news, I don't want to get up. Then when I have nothing else to read, that's when I get up and I have breakfast, etc. So this is just a simple exercise to realize that it's very likely that you're not entirely aware of your habits. It really helps to make a list. When you do that, you can strategize, you can realize that some things should go in a different order, some habits you would like to acquire, and others you would like to get rid of. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A habit is a behavior that you perform regularly, and it's very common that you're not aware that you're doing them. We're going to see how to make those habits more explicit. Every behavior is associated with an outcome. The important thing to remember is that you have zero control over the outcome. Wanting to speak more fluently is not going to make you more fluent. But you have 100% control over your behavior. So if you decide, I want to spend 1 hour every day or doing whatever, practicing a language, that has the real effect. It's very common to feel frustrated with your language journey or with any other thing going on in your life. And it's usually because you are trying to change the outcome without strategizing about the behavior that you could implement. Who you become, the kind of person you become, depends on your actions, not on your goals. This is a concept that took me a while to really internalize, so bear with me. Hard goals are difficult. Like learning a language is a marathon. You're not going to do it quickly. And whenever you run into an obstacle, you have two big tools that you can use. You can rely on willpower. This is when you say to yourself, I have to do this, or somebody tells you, you have to do this. You can do it for a while at the beginning. Anyone can start doing something difficult for a few days, like going for a run when you don't feel like it. But to really get the unfair advantage, it helps if it's part of your identity. If you consider yourself a runner, it's much easier to go running when you don't feel like it. So the things you repeat become part of your identity, and that's why I said that your actions are what determine the type of person you become, not necessarily your goals. So we're here to talk about how to form good habits and how to break bad ones, just as important. Breaking bad habits will free up a lot of time, so that might be even more useful. I'm basically giving you my take on this excellent book. I recommend you read it if you haven't read it before. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. They have it in English and in any other language you want, so no excuse not to read it. You can practice your languages while you read this book. And the main idea that he shares in the book is the habit loop. This is how habits are formed. It's a process made up of 4 stages. The first stage is the cue. You notice that something happened, or you see something. Usually it's visual, because we're visual creatures. So your phone vibrates. That triggers a specific craving. You want to know who sent you the message, what the contents of the message were. So that motivates you to respond, to take action, and then you read the text message. Once you read the text message, you get the reward. You found out what they said, who was texting you, and that gets associated with the cue. So whenever you get a reward, you're going to remember the cue that started the whole process. If you've ever wanted to break a habit and you weren't able to do it, it's because this loop was still active. And likewise, if you've ever said, I need to start doing whatever, and you didn't do it, this habit was not working. So let's look at the 4 stages just to see practical tips that we can implement to make this loop actually more achievable. First stage, you can make cues more visible if it's a good habit, or less visible. You can make cravings more or less desirable. Responses can be easier or harder. And we're going to look at rewards, how to make them more or less satisfying. Okay, so let's start with the cues. I'm sure you've read some of this, articles like this online, about 80% of people don't drink enough water. I was one of them, and it's kind of weird, because if you don't drink water, you die, so it shouldn't be that hard to remember to drink water. But apparently, we don't drink enough. So that was one of the habits that I wanted to acquire, drink more water. This was like over a year ago. My second habit that I started planning was just before this gathering. I wanted to have a morning session learning Polish. So I'm going to show you a few of the tips that I used to implement these habits, and to illustrate how you can do the same with your own habits. It's not about me, it's about you. So, drink more water. I decided I needed a cue to not forget. So I started with an empty water bottle. I just left an empty water bottle in my kitchen counter, and that was my visible cue. I see it, I wake up in the morning, see an empty water bottle in the kitchen, I'm going to fill it, and then I'm going to take it with me when I go to work. Easy. And for studying Polish, one of the biggest distractions in my life, and probably in your life, is email. So the first thing I would see in the morning when I turned on the computer was a full inbox, and that was my cue to start working. So I needed to hide that cue so it wouldn't be remembered. So I wouldn't remember that I had to work. I could focus on studying, practicing. So there's this thing you can do on your computer. You can create a virtual desktop, and this is my regular work desktop. I just switch it, and then here's my Polish desktop. So when I turn on my computer, I don't see all the work stuff. I just see, this is what I need to do. Just Google multiple desktops, Windows or Mac, whatever you're using, to find the instructions. It's really easy. And you might be a physical person. You can use the same thing. You can study in a different room or have a dedicated table. That's up to you. But the key takeaway is that it's much easier to avoid temptation than to resist it. So if you don't see the cookie in front of you, if you see it, you will definitely be tempted to eat it. But if you don't see it, you wouldn't necessarily go downstairs and go out to the street to buy it at the supermarket. So avoid temptation. All of the cues all the tips that I've shown before for my habits, they're basically different ways of designing your environment. Supermarkets do this all the time. Marketers do this all the time. If they do it to get us to buy their products, we should do the same thing for our goals. There's a reason why all tasty things are in the cash register. Another thing you can do is eliminate distractions. So my phone is always on Do Not Disturb mode. You can actually set it so it rings with when a favorite contact calls you, if you're afraid you might miss something important. But another thing, I take it to another level. I hide it. I do not want to be able to see my phone when I'm in a moment of frustration, when I'm practicing Polish or anything else. Just seeing it is enough to just go reach for it. So if I don't see it, I might not go looking for it. One thing that helps me a lot is using a timer. It's really convenient. I mean, I've actually created this Pavlovian association with this thing. Every time I click it, I know I'm going to be studying Polish. I like physical timers better than analog or digital timers because they're always on your desk. You don't have to remember how to turn it off. If you have an alarm in your phone, you might get a notification from your boss. That's not what you want when you're concentrating. So having a dedicated tool to do something as useful as practice your languages, I think is a very good investment, and they're really cheap. They're like $8. And also it helps because it keeps your perception of time grounded. Sometimes when my practice session is not going well, I feel like I'm almost done, like 50 minutes have passed and only 20 minutes have passed. And other times when it's going really well, I could keep going for hours and then basically mess up my whole morning because I have other priorities I want to get done. So it's a good reminder to assess that your energy is matching what you're doing. Another practical tip you can implement when you want to start a new habit and you have other habits, other existing habits, is to make the end of an existing habit the cue for the next habit that you want to start. So let me give you an example. When I'm ready to stop working for the day, around 6, 7 p.m., I follow this routine. I switch desktops, go into my Polish desktop, and then I turn off the PC. When I turn it off, I take the water bottle and I take it to the kitchen. It's supposed to be empty, so it's ready for the next day. Another example, when I'm having breakfast in the morning, I fill the bottle with water and then I turn on my computer. I see my Polish desktop and I press my 60-minute timer. It's really easy. You just have to make a list of your habits and then see if you can stack one of them with something new. Existing habits become the cue for the new habit. Okay, we've looked at cues, how to make them more or less visible. Let's see what we can do about cravings. I'm sure you've done this before, but maybe you didn't call it temptation bundling. This is basically when you make a list of things you want. They could be drinking coffee, drinking beer, tea, listening to your favorite podcast, or watching your favorite YouTube channel. Things you enjoy, going out with friends, going shopping, taking a nap, power nap every day after lunch. Those are the things I want, and there are also things I need to be doing more often. You make your list. I should be going to the gym, should be running, or cleaning the house, reviewing flashcards, if that's something you struggle with. Maybe reading, studying, writing something, instead of just passive listening, which is usually in the want category more often than in the need category. So then once you have your list, just combine them. For example, when I review 20 flashcards, I will get to drink coffee. So this is the reward that you want to get, and then you're tricking your brain to associate it with this particular task. You want to review. You don't really want to review flashcards, but you know you should. So you definitely want to drink coffee. You can just link them together. Another example, when I write a 100-word story in my target language, I will get to listen my favorite podcast. So this list, of course, works for me, but you have to come up with your own list of wants and needs and combine them. One thing that's really helpful, as everyone in this conference knows, is spending time with your tribe. I mean, these are the people who share your obsession, and it's really inspiring to be surrounded by people who are currently doing what you want to do. I mean, they achieved this goal that you're currently pursuing several years ago, maybe, so they're proof that it's possible to do it. It's possible to speak a language fluently. 3 years ago, I started an online school, Deliberate Spanish. It's for students who want to get out of Spanish Intermediate Purgatory. And it's really interesting because one of the key aspects of it is that students interact with each other and teachers, of course. They get corrections from teachers. But it really helps to be surrounded by people who are in the same journey you are. So students reply to each other, and they're imitating the behavior of the people who share their goals. This is why coming to places like this really helps to boost your motivation. Once you leave, you have to do something with that motivation. So it helps to join communities, places where you can continue to be reminded that this is why you came. Those are ways of making cravings more or less desirable, basically tricking your brain. And now let's talk about how to take action in a way that's easier or harder. So after I started leaving an empty water bottle, I got better at having a bottle next to me all the time. The problem is that I still forgot to drink. So it would be next to me, and then by the end of the day, it was still full. So I decided to make the difficulty level even easier by eliminating an extra step. So instead of having to unscrew the cap, I could just flip it and drink from the straw. I know it's stupid, but it really helped. I also didn't have to stop reading when I was reading to look up and drink. I could just sip with my, without doing anything else, just sip and continue reading. Everybody has their own mental problems. And this works because you're eliminating steps. When I'm focusing on Polish, I'm always looking up new words. And I don't know if you know this, some people probably do, but others prepare for your mind to be blown. You can just type whatever word, I chose FOR, and then a word to go directly into whatever website you often go to. So I type FOR space, the word in Polish, and then I get the website. You don't have to go through Google and click multiple times. For me, this is really important. I do it multiple times a day. Same thing with any other website that you use often. Like anytime I want to know the declension of a particular word, I just type Wik space the word, and I get Wiktionary with all the information I need. It's really easy to use it. You just have to Google how to add custom search engines to your browser. It works in Firefox, in Chrome, anything you're using. If you're not using this, please use it. It will save your life. As I mentioned before, you can have a dedicated space. It can be physical, if you prefer, or both. I mean, it could be physical and virtual. So that was good habits, how to make good habits easier to implement. Now let's talk about how to make bad habits harder to implement. One thing I do is restricting bad behaviors, or basically this is completely subjective. These are behaviors that I decide are bad for me, that drive me further away from the kind of person I want to become. So I don't want to spend my time reading junk news or like wasting time in social media, but I do it more than I'd like to. So I've come up with this silly rule that works for me. Restrict time and location when I'm allowed to do these activities. So instead of just anytime I want, I can only check news or watch YouTube when I'm sitting in the living room after a meal. If I do it in bed, it's way too much. I end up reading too much, and I regret it. And if I do it whenever I want, like when I'm in the table, having dinner with friends, I also regret it, because then I'm missing life. So no phone in bed. Of course, my phone does not go into the bedroom. And this helps me because when you make a situation artificially scarce, you value it more. That's it. So if you're doing something too much, you need to, you can still enjoy it, but just make it more scarce. Another example is creating artificial barriers. All the apps that we use have been designed to be as addictive as possible. If you use TikTok, you know what I'm talking about. It's just another video, and then when you finish the video, there's another video. So you don't have to do anything. But you can reverse engineer this for your own goals. I like reading news, but now I'm not allowed to read a news article or a blog article directly or watch a YouTube video directly. First, I have to add it to Pocket, which is an app that basically aggregates all the stuff you send it to it. And then once it's in Pocket, I can decide to consume it, but I have to see that, okay, it's going to take me 4 minutes or 40 minutes to read this article. Do I really want to read it? So I need to make this decision before I start. And that really helps. A lot of the things I add in Pocket, I never read, which means that I shouldn't have read them in the first place. Another important practical, maybe not so practical, but a key idea that you should be aware of, and once you think about it, you'll see it everywhere, are critical moments. For example, when I start a timer, I'm basically constraining all of my acceptable options for the next hour. I mean, I've done it enough times that pressing the timer and like watching news would feel really wrong. So for me, that's a critical time, critical moment. Other critical moments could be sitting down in a restaurant. I mean, in theory, you could like tell the waiter, "Oh, sorry, I'm leaving," but we don't do that. I mean, we're sitting in this restaurant. We're going to eat in this restaurant. So that's a critical moment. If you come to a talk, you're basically staying for the whole talk. I mean, you could leave if you wanted, but we tend not to do that for societal pressures. Another example is suggesting to your conversation partner that you would like to meet on Tuesday at 10. If they say yes, you're going to be there, even if you don't feel like it. So those are critical moments that determine what you're going to be doing in the future, near future, far future. So if you get those right, your day will work out pretty well. I mean, you're going to have a lot of these critical moments throughout the day, and the decisions you make are going to determine if you have a good day that brings you further, closer to your goals, or further away. If you make a right choice, you go up closer to the good day. If you make a bad choice, then you go down. And this is basically the way to get closer to who you want to become. Focus on the critical moments. There's going to be bad days, days when you don't feel like doing whatever behavior you've decided that is important for you. So whenever you set a goal, set like your reach goal and then like the minimum goal. For the day when you have a super busy schedule, there's no way you can do everything. Okay, at least you can do the minimum. Some examples, you could always you can always make time to review 3 flashcards. And then if you want, you can keep going, but you did your 3 flashcards. You can come up, you don't feel like writing, but you can come up with topics that, the you from tomorrow has to do. So it's much easier. Once you come up with 4 topic ideas to write about in your target language, you might actually be inspired to write a little bit more. If you decide that you're going for a 5-minute run, it might seem ridiculous, but just going through the effort of putting on your shoes, going outside, and actually running for 5 minutes, after 5 minutes, you will be in a different mental state. So you're allowed to stop, but if you want to continue going, you can continue. It's really important to understand how you're managing your energy. If you have a lot of energy, maybe at the beginning of the day, usually at the beginning, after coffee, maybe, and you're doing hard tasks that are important for you, then you're closer to this concept of deliberate practice, which is really important in language learning. If you have low energy, but you're doing easy tasks like passive listening or any other chores that you have to do, you're more close to the relaxed practice. And then if you have a lot of energy and you're doing easy tasks, you're kind of wasting your potential. You're in wasting time territory. And of course, if you're doing hard tasks and you don't have a lot of energy, that's a recipe for burnout. So knowing what is the difficulty of the tasks that you're doing and how much energy you have helps you plan out your day, realize when you're going to be doing what tasks are more or less tiring. This is just good strategizing. It will help you achieve more. So going to the 4th stage, I think we're doing good on time. How to make rewards more or less satisfying, depending on your goals. So if you didn't think I was crazy enough, I have another anecdote to illustrate why it's important to make rewards satisfying. I live in Barcelona, and it gets very hot in the summer. So if you leave a bottle of water on your desk, it's going to get warm. I don't like to drink warm water. So I started adding ice. The problem is that then you get these water stains, which are not very satisfying. we live in 2022. I think this first world problem should disappear. So I decided to buy this magical bottle. It's like a thermos bottle, and it's got this amazing metal straw. Very, very rewarding. When I take a sip, I get this super cold water throughout the day. It lasts for like 8-10 hours. It's still cold. So this was my way of making things more satisfying. Because endings are memorable. We remember the ends of interactions much more than the beginning or the middle. And if you have a habit that ends on a high point, you're much more likely to repeat it. If when you finish a lesson, the teacher yells at you, you might not want to go back to that teacher, even if the rest of the class was normal. So how can you make your rewards more satisfying? One of the things I do when I'm reviewing flashcards is that I am not allowed to quit until I answer one card correctly. So if I made a mistake, I'm not allowed to quit. This is because you want to quit when you're winning, not when you're losing. It's a small thing, but just knowing that, I made a mistake, so I have to keep going until I get it right. It's a much better mental space to leave your practice than when you made 3 mistakes in a row. Another satisfying thing you can do is to track your habits. I mean, just make a list of the things you want to start doing or that you have had trouble with in the past, and just keep adding X's or squares or whatever you want, and try not to break the chain. This is really important for new habits because, I mean, I've done the Polish thing enough times that for me, it's just automatic, but it wasn't when I started, not the first week, maybe not the first 2 weeks. It's really important that you don't skip multiple days. I mean, you're going to skip a few days, it's common, but if you skip once, that's an accident. If you skip twice, or you skip 3 times, that's the beginning of a new habit. So you want to avoid it. That's why it's so important to have minimum goals. You know, if my goal is 60 minutes of Polish, that's great. But if I don't have time, I can always do 3 flashcards. That counts. I decided that counts. You decide what counts for you. So if it's not only binary, like I did it or I didn't do it, you can also track the amount of time, the amount of things that you do. If you're using your computer for work, there's a lot of automatic tools that take care of all of this, so you don't have to do it yourself. This was what I did. What I did on May 30th, I learned Polish for an hour, I worked on this presentation, I had lunch, and then I planned this trip. So I know if I want to go back and see how long did I spend learning Polish, I can see that for the past 50 days, I spent 50 hours. So this is my goal. Consistency is not perfect, but if you can keep up this rhythm for a year, you'll see results. That's the only thing you can control, not the outcome. Another thing I like to do might be kind of geeky, but it's changed my life, so I need to share it here. You can have recurring events on your calendar, but you're probably not creating events for every little task that you do. So besides a calendar, you can also have a task manager. And it's really important that you choose a task manager that lets you create recurring tasks. So recurring tasks look like this. I have a date associated with every task. So if it's on my manager, on my task manager, it has a date. Of course, that can change, but it needs to have a date. And then if I set it as recurring, I mean, every day I'm supposed to leave the empty water bottle in the kitchen counter. So whenever I complete that action, I can very satisfyingly check it, and then instead of disappearing or getting crossed, it just turns into tomorrow's task. So this is what I need to do tomorrow. Same thing with the Polish desktop. When I click it, it's there for tomorrow. Just Google Todoist, Dynalist. There's a million task manager apps that have recurring tasks. This completely changed my life. I do it for everything. I do it for birthdays. I do it for dental checkups. Like, you're not going to remember next year's dental checkup. But if you put it here, you can forget it. If you need to do something every Monday and Wednesday, but on alternating weeks, you will never remember it. You can put it in your calendar if it's a proper event, like a trip. You usually don't forget your trips, but you might forget to, vacuum once a week. So put it in your task manager. Okay, these are the 4 main topics. Make your cues more visible. You can do that by changing or designing your environment so it works for you. Don't accept the default behavior. You know, like these badges, they're too long. When you're eating, nobody can see where you're from. So just make them shorter. You can stack habits, use timers, just things to make cues more visible. When you have a craving, you can bundle what you need to do with what you want to do. You can also join a tribe of people to be reminded that that's what you really want to do with your life. You can eliminate or add extra steps and friction to make actions easier to implement and focus on the critical moments. If you jump on a bus, you're going to be in that bus for a while, so why not make that decision easier if that's where you want to go? And then make rewards more satisfying, especially endings, because they're more memorable. And track your time and habits. Have a big poster in your wall with all the days that you've been studying or doing whatever is important for you at the moment. If it's an important goal, it's probably not going to get solved in a couple of days. You will have to sustain that effort for a long time. So reminding yourself that you're doing it, that you're winning every day, really helps. This is the takeaway. If you remember one thing from this talk, you need to build consistent habits. To become the person you want to be, you need to build consistent habits. Good intentions are not enough. And this is my homework for you. So you're going back home tomorrow. It's a perfect time when you're on the train or the plane. You're going back to your house, to your home. Make a list of your current habits, the things that you would like to stop doing, the things that you would like to start doing, and see how they match. I recommend doing it using this format, when, whatever context. I do action. I just gave you this example. When I'm flying back home, I will make a list of my habits. You can also read Atomic Habits or any other book that goes into a lot more depth. This was my specific take, but it's worth a read. And if you would like to get out of Spanish Intermediate Purgatory, you can check out La Comunidad. We have a lot of free resources as well, so give it a try. And that's all for me. Thanks a lot, and I hope you stay consistent. If you have questions, I see there's a few. You can ask them on Slido, #Babel. Okay, I'm going to see if I can answer them from here. Yes. First question. It takes a lot of time to recharge when I get back from work. Do you have any tips on more efficient relaxing? Well, I don't know you well enough, Anonymous, to know how you like to relax. So I don't know if I'm qualified to say a lot about it, but if you realize that it takes time to recharge, you might want to get started before you go to work. I know this is not the answer you wanted to hear, but I mean, I've seen it my whole life. I'm more consistent when I do things in the morning. I have more energy when I do things in the morning than if I wait until I'm done with work. When I'm done with work, I need time to recharge, and it's not easy. So one thing you can do is go to bed a bit earlier, half an hour, and then you can wake up half an hour earlier. And that's the time, whatever you get done in that extra half an hour is probably going to be more than what you will get done after work. In my experience, that's how it works. Can you share your favorite apps to get organized? I mean, I share 90% in this presentation. I could not live without DynoList. That's what I use. And that's it. I mean, I'm just always have a task manager open when something happens. All the notes that I took in this conference, I have a task that says, when you get back home, go over all your tasks and decide what you want to do with that. All the notes that you took and decide what you want to do with it. That's all you need, really. I mean, it helps if you can write it on your phone as well. All these apps have, all these websites have apps, so you don't need much more. Another thing I forgot to say is that it's not really about the methods for language learning or for getting organized. It's about using a method consistently. So anything works. There's no perfect answer. Do you believe in decision fatigue? Ooh, interesting. The idea that making decisions requires a finite amount of energy, so we should limit how many decisions we make. 100% agree with this person. Decision fatigue is real, so you should make as few decisions as possible. Just automate. Anytime I set up a recurring task, I am automating that decision. I never have to think about it again. It will just decide if I want to do Polish because I have the habit already created. Less effort spent on making trivial decisions that I already know the answer to means more energy for the actual important decisions, like who do I want to become? What kind of person do I want to be in the next 5 years? Besides flashcards, do you use sticky notes on your room wall or computer to study new vocabulary? I tried it when I was learning Italian. I thought it was super fun to fill my wall with new words and like drawings and things. But I found that the whole point of having flashcards is that you have the answer hidden. So if you don't have that extra step where you have to go from question to answer, if you're reading the answer right away, it kind of goes away. So I couldn't do that very efficiently with sticky notes because I didn't want to move them around and they were really messy to organize. So it was cool for decoration, but not for actual learning. What should you do if, for example, you start wasting time even when using a productivity timer and then get used to that bad habit inside the good habit? Whoa, it's like Inception. So if you start wasting time when you're using a productivity timer, you're not being very honest with yourself. I would just go through the loop. Eliminate distractions. Why are you getting distracted? Why are you wasting time? Do you have access to the internet? Then remove access to the internet if that's what's distracting you. If you're wasting time, one thing writers do is they say, okay, I don't have to write, but I need to sit here and not do anything else. If that's the alternative, then you might just start writing because the alternative is not that good. Whenever, when you were in class, or let's say you're working with a coworker who is sitting behind you. Let's say your boss is sitting right behind you at work. You're going to be much more productive because he or she can see your screen, okay? So then why are you giving yourself the freedom to be less productive? Just create artificial constraints so you can be as productive as in a less desirable situation. That's my tip. Sometimes studying a language, when I'm studying a language, I get in flow or in the zone. That's a great feeling. Happy not to notice time. Is it still better to stop after 30 or 60 minutes, or is it considered good? It depends on your goals. I mean, I have other priorities, but when I was learning Polish, right now, at this stage of my life, I have other priorities. I want to work on my business. I want to have a social life. I want to work out. I want to do other things. And it breaks my routine if I go for 3 hours one day, and then the next day maybe I'm not going to want to do another 3 hours, and I might just do 10. I prefer to do 1 hour because I know it's sustainable for me. So it's up to you. I mean, when I was learning Italian, I just wanted to do Italian the whole day. And that was great for me because I was procrastinating on writing a thesis. So I had all the time in the world to procrastinate. But it depends on your life decision, your life choices. Can you learn good habits by replacing How to decide where to draw the line for max number of simultaneous learning projects? Well, it depends. I mean, how to draw the line for max number of simultaneous learning projects? Start with one. Once that becomes a habit, you can maybe add another one. But whenever I say the words, I want to start doing X, I immediately create a recurring task. And I say, okay, when am I going to do this thing? And how often am I going to do it? If I cannot create that task because I don't have enough time, or it's not clear when or how often I will be able to do this thing, then that means I'm not ready to add another project. You can also reassess your current projects. You might say, I'm doing too many things right now, and this thing is no longer important. And then that's how you create more time for new projects. Do you have a habit associated with listening to Muse? No. Can you learn good habits by replacing anytime you want to grab your phone, you grab a book instead? I mean, yeah, you can do anything you want. But it's very unlikely that you will actually grab a book every time you want to grab your phone. If your desk is full of books and your phone is in another room, sure. I mean, you can grab a book. It's much more likely that you will grab the book. I mean, I don't have to give you permission. Just give it a try. Set up a tracker, like put an X every time you do it, and then you will see if it's possible or if it's not possible. Do you have tips for making bad habits less rewarding? Sure, it depends on the habit, but there are many ways of making things less rewarding. I recommend you read the book. He gives a few examples, but just what we saw here. What if you decide to do something spontaneously and it messes with your plans? Okay, I lied before when I said I only use my task manager. I actually use two things. I use a task manager and I use a day planner. So every day I have two columns, the plan and the reality, and every row is a different hour of the day, right? So when I started the day, I say, okay, so it's like 7 in the morning. I'm going to be doing Polish for 1 hour. And then I want to do this, and I want to do this. I have this block here. I'm going to have lunch at this time, and then I have a meeting at this time, so I can't do anything there. What do I want to do with all of the remaining time? Once you assign a job to each minute of the day, or each hour of the day, it doesn't have to be that precise, it's much easier to get like this idea of what you're doing that day. If you have time, if you don't have time, because time is fluid. But if you have squares on a page, that's much more realistic and much more easier for your brain to comprehend. So plans, reality never goes the same as my plans, and that's okay, because if you have a plan, you can improve your plan once something else comes up. If you don't have a plan, you will end up binging a Netflix show for 3 hours. You know, it's much easier to stop watching one more show, if you know that you have a meeting with your boss in 2 hours. So come up with those constraints for yourself. Just decide, okay, I need to do this because that's what I said in the morning. Now I know I don't have unlimited free time to watch Netflix. Do those browser shortcuts also work on phones? They do not. So you can create app shortcuts. So website, you have apps on your phone. If you go to a website and you go to options, there's a way to add this website to my home screen. And then it's sort of like an app, but no, it doesn't work. This tip is not for me. No tips on mastering Arabic. Most adults quit learning for psychological issues. Some of them even suffer from anxiety and depression issues. What do you recommend for people struggling with this? Well, you should talk to someone who knows about psychology. I don't. I'd like to use an app to track only my studying time. Do you or anyone else has a suggestion of a specific app? I mean, there are a million apps. Just Google track time app, Windows, Android, and you'll find it. Dan Ariely's method for making a bad task less rewarding. Every time you do it, give a donation to a charity you disagree with. This is great. Yeah, if it works for you, give it a try. Okay, that was the last question. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you. I hope you stay consistent.